The story begins in an isolated castle surrounded by dragons and unimaginable creatures. Inside, the hero Vermouth and his 4 comrades advance toward the Demon King's hideout. They push through hordes of wyverns and undead. The great Vermouth slashes enemies with his sacred sword. The wise Sienna wields elemental magic to eradicate obstacles. The faithful Anise summons her god's blessing to cleanse the evil. The brave Moron swings his giant axe, smashing every foe in his path. And finally, the foolish Hamel charges forward, wielding his sword to cut down his enemies. After a fierce encounter, we learn that Hamel has always been jealous of Vermouth, even viewing him as a rival. Yet, no one else acknowledges this rivalry. They press onward, but suddenly Hamel screams Vermouth's name with all his strength. A swift attack speeds toward Vermouth, who remains unaware. At the last moment, Hamel throws himself in front of Vermouth, taking a devastating, piercing strike. Hamel spits blood as Vermouth stands frozen in shock. The monster retracts its tentacle, readying for another attack, while Hamel collapses to the ground, fatally wounded. The creature laughs and prepares to strike again. This time, Vermouth, fully focused, charges forward and slashes the monster in one swift strike, leaving it no chance to counter. Hamel's companions rush to his side, panic etched across their faces. Vermouth, unable to meet his eyes, says he didn't have to die like this. Hamel, even in his dying moments, smiles and says, "This is an honorable way to die." As death approaches, Hamel asks Vermouth to kill the remaining demon kings. Vermouth takes his hand and swears, as a hero, to fulfill that promise. Hamel bids farewell to Anise, Moron, and Sienna. With his last breath, he begins to confess his feelings to Sienna. But suddenly, a foot stomps down on the page, shattering the story's flow. A white-haired boy yells toward the sky, furious. He shouts that he never said any of those things. No matter how many times he reads it, the story infuriates him. The anonymous author is lucky to remain unknown, or he'd find and beat them senseless. He keeps complaining, irritated that he's the only one called an idiot in the book. He wonders if someone he defeated 300 years ago could have written it. Tossing the book aside, he questions why the other 4 left the story as it is. But in the end, he doesn't blame them. After all, who could have predicted he'd reincarnate with all his memories intact? And that's not all. Besides being the same Hamel, he never expected to reincarnate as a descendant of the hero Vermouth. This is our protagonist, Eugene Lionheart, formerly known as Hamel, the Foolish. When Vermouth was alive, he had a wife and many concubines. The part of the family considered the direct line consisted only of the offspring from his main wife. Our protagonist, despite bearing the Lionheart surname, was part of the collateral line. The family holds an event called the Bloodline Continuation Ceremony, and before it, no member of the collateral line is allowed to train with mana or real swords. For this reason, Eugene has only trained with a wooden sword until now. Using the sword, he strikes the dummy with precision, and, with a powerful slash, cuts it in half. His father appears, startled by his son's extraordinary talent. He becomes even more uneasy when he examines his son's physique, unable to believe Eugene is only 13 years old. Eugene speaks with a tone that doesn't match his age and shows no sign of naivety. His father mentions that the Bloodline Continuation Ceremony will take place tomorrow. This event is a tradition held once every 10 years in the Lionheart family. During the ceremony, both the main and collateral lines compete to determine who is worthy of being called a Lionheart. All children between the ages of 10 and 15 gather at the main Lionheart estate to participate. However, the event seems rigged against the collateral lines, as only the main line is allowed to train with weapons and mana, giving them an overwhelming advantage. Eugene's father believes his son has immense talent, so much so that even he questions if Eugene is truly his child. If Eugene had been talentless like his father, he wouldn't have to endure the pain of comparing himself to the gifted. Eugene snaps his father back to reality, questioning why he's wearing such an expression. His father embraces him and pleads with him to avoid confrontation with the children from the direct line, warning that talent alone cannot overcome their advantages. Eugene promises to steer clear of conflict, but inwardly, he plans the opposite. Smirking, he considers the ceremony will be boring since it's essentially a competition between 10-year-old children. He spots another dummy and approaches it slowly. As he walks, he analyzes his main obstacles: a child from the first wife and twins from the second wife of the direct line. The rest he considers trash. With another powerful slash, he destroys the dummy into pieces. Smiling maliciously, he grows excited at the thought of testing the strength of his former rival's descendants. On his way to the ceremony by carriage, Eugene reflects on his past. As a child, he learned skills easily, even considering himself a genius. But upon meeting Vermouth, he realized there were true geniuses in the world. Vermouth was proficient in both swordsmanship and magic, earning the title of the God of War. He was a duke in his homeland before relinquishing his title and was celebrated as a hero until the very end. His other three comrades also achieved greatness. The wise Sienna became the youngest head wizard of the Magic Tower. The faithful Anise, known as a saintess, left teachings that are still followed today. The brave Moron established his own kingdom. Eugene's thoughts suddenly turn to rage as he wonders why the Demon King is still alive after all this time. Vermouth had promised to eradicate all the Demon Kings. Eugene recalls his own death at the castle of the Demon King of Incarceration. He remembers the promise Vermouth made with that demon after his death. A promise that was the first step toward peace in the world. 300 years have passed, and that peace still persists to this day. His escort interrupts his thoughts, noticing Eugene looks tense. He advises him to relax, warning that life at the main house will be difficult otherwise. Finally, they arrive. A massive gate stands before Eugene, and his escort welcomes him to the main estate of the Lionheart. He finally enters, but his surroundings are completely empty. He isn't even surprised that no one has come to welcome a member of the collateral line. His gaze falls on one of the flags in the house, displaying the symbol of a lion. Only the direct descendants of Lionheart are allowed to wear that emblem on their left chest. Eugene asks his escort if any of his relatives have arrived yet. The escort replies that he is the first to arrive and proceeds to show him the house. When they reach his room, a maid introduces herself as Nina and explains that she will serve him during his stay. Eugene asks Nina if she knows when his relatives will arrive. She answers that they will arrive within 4 days at the latest. Eugene then asks her to show him the training gym, leaving her surprised. Elsewhere in the house, two siblings are discussing the identity of the newcomer. The brother mentions that Eugene is from the west of the empire, mocking him for being more familiar with a pitchfork than a sword. He adds that the carriage must now be reeking of cow manure and says he will teach Eugene how to care for the family's property. The sister laughs, agreeing with her brother's plan. The brother calls her Seal and clarifies that he doesn't intend to punish Eugene, only give him a friendly warning. Ciel continues laughing as they prepare to leave. However, another child has been watching them from the shadows. Noticing him, Ciel glares menacingly, forcing the child to quickly hide behind the curtains. Eugene is now training on the field using a spear weighted with sandbags. In his previous life, he was never lazy with training, but in this new body, he pushes himself to the extreme. No matter how far he goes, his body handles it with ease, and minor injuries heal incredibly fast. He chuckles to himself, marveling at the extraordinary condition of Vermouth's descendant. Eugene continues making swift movements with the spear, and Nina watches in disbelief. She cannot fathom how he can execute those moves with sandbags strapped to his spear and arms. Suddenly, a voice startles Nina. It is Cyan, accompanied by Ciel. Cyan asks Nina what Eugene is doing. Nina stammers nervously, trying to respond while wondering why the siblings are there. Cyan grows impatient and demands a proper answer. Eugene stops his training and replies that he is obviously training with a spear. He finishes his sentence by calling Cyan an idiot. Ciel laughs at her brother, pointing out that a so-called country kid just insulted him. Cyan, furious, demands an immediate apology from Eugene. Eugene agrees and delivers a quick, casual apology, leaving Cyan momentarily stunned. Cyan regains his composure and insists on a proper apology, demanding Eugene bow his head politely. Eugene dismisses the demand, stating there is no reason to bow since they are of the same age and should be friends. Kian refuses the idea of being friends. He declares that although Eugene might be a Lionheart, they are not equals. Ciel interrupts and reminds her brother to bring up the carriage. Cyan immediately orders Eugene to clean the carriage, claiming it must reek of cow manure because of him. Eugene remains calm and asks Nina if she is his servant, just to check. When she confirms, he instructs her to clean the carriage instead. Nina looks confused, caught between conflicting orders. Cyan becomes enraged at Eugene for directing the maid to do what he had ordered. Furious, he introduces himself as Cyan Lionheart, attempting to assert his dominance. Eugene responds nonchalantly, introducing himself in return and suggesting they get along. Ciel waves cheerfully and introduces herself, further frustrating Cyan. Cyan declares that he will not get along with Eugene for ignoring his commands. Spotting a wooden sword on the ground, Cyan picks it up. Feeling his honor has been insulted, he challenges Eugene to a duel. Eugene reminds him that a duel is serious and shouldn't be taken lightly. He asks him to leave, but Cyan responds by asking if he's scared, striking a nerve in Eugene. Cyan adds that if Eugene is scared, he should keep his head down and apologize. Eugene calmly replies that he's not scared, but he doesn't want to fuel the situation or apologize. Frustrated, Cyan insults Eugene's parents, claiming they failed to teach him honor for running away. Eugene grows tired of Cyan's bluffing and removes his sandbags, signaling his readiness for the duel. After releasing the last of his sandbags, he demands Cyan to toss the handkerchief. Cyan hesitates as he notices the heavy impact of the sandbags on the floor, realizing they weren't just props. The thought of backing out crosses his mind, but having demanded the duel, he can't back off now. If he does, Seal will mock him for the rest of his life. Determined, Cyan grabs the handkerchief and prepares to punish Eugene. He officially starts the duel by tossing the handkerchief into the air. As it falls, Eugene bends into a ready stance, accepting the challenge. The moment it touches the ground, Eugene lunges forward, striking Cyan directly in the stomach and sending him flying back with ease. Cyan's face twists in pain and shock, but Eugene remains stoic. Eugene declares himself the winner since Cyan fails to stand up. Ciel rushes to her brother, concerned for his condition. Cyan is clearly unwell, releasing his breakfast after the blow to his stomach. Ciel turns to Eugene, accusing him of being unfair and dishonorable. Eugene questions why it was unfair, pointing out that the duel began the moment the handkerchief was tossed. What happened next was Cyan's fault for being careless. Ciel reluctantly agrees, but tries to argue that Eugene has been secretly training mana. Eugene denies it, stating that the collateral line is forbidden from training mana. Unconvinced, Ciel calls him a liar, arguing there's no way to deliver such an attack without using mana. She adds that even if her brother had been prepared for the attack, the outcome would have been the same. Eugene smirks, impressed by her sharp observation skills. However, he notes that Cyan's loss wasn't entirely one-sided, as he managed to jump back instinctively when sensing the attack. Despite this, Eugene concludes that as one of Vermouth's descendants, Cyan is still trash. Cyan finally stands up, using what little energy he has left to call Eugene's victory cheap. Eugene laughs, pointing out that the twins seem to share the same excuses. He approaches Cyan, urging him to admit defeat, reminding him that he is an honorable member of the main Lionheart family. Cyan, consumed by his pride, refuses to acknowledge his loss. At that moment, a butler appears, calling out to Cyan and sparing him further humiliation. Eugene observes the butler, deducing that he must be a skilled knight hired by the family. Cyan calls the butler Hezar and runs to him, crying over his defeat by a so-called country bumpkin. Through his tears, Cyan continues lamenting the loss in a duel he initiated, confusing Hezar with the mention of a duel. Hezar and Eugene exchange introductions. After formalities, Hezar, visibly concerned, asks for an explanation. Eugene recounts how Cyan demanded a duel after insulting his father. Cyan tries to deny it, but Eugene reminds everyone of being called a coward because his father supposedly didn't teach him honor. With a serious gaze, Eugene asks Hezar if such insults weren't reason enough to accept the duel. Hezar is momentarily speechless before admitting that the reasoning is valid. He escorts Cyan inside the house to tend to his injuries. As they leave, Ciel waves cheerfully, looking forward to their next encounter with Eugene. Eugene stoically bids her farewell. Later, Eugene enjoys a grand feast when Nina approaches him with news. She informs him that 3 more young masters will arrive by tomorrow morning, with 2 more expected in the evening. Eugene realizes that everyone is gathering quickly due to the start of the bloodline continuation ceremony. He steps outside, looking up at the sky, speaking to his former ally. He apologizes in advance for what he's about to do to his descendants. But he reasons that his former ally shouldn't be upset, as Eugene never asked to be reborn as one of his descendants. Inside the mansion, Hazel, Cyan, and Ciel stand before Anasilia, the mother of the twins and second wife of the main line. She wants confirmation of her son's loss to a child from the collateral line. Hazel confirms with an ashamed expression. Anasilia calls Cyan to approach. She presses her fan against his wound, tension building as she mentions it took only 1 strike to beat him. She asks Hezar if he is completely sure Eugene has no experience with mana. Hezar confirms, adding that he sensed no trace of mana in Eugene's body. She turns to Ciel and asks her to explain how Cyan lost. Ciel explains that Eugene's thrust was so fast that Cyan couldn't retreat or avoid it. Cyan tries to speak, lifting his head to explain, but Anasilia immediately slaps him. Her patience wears thin as she begins yelling. She asks how Cyan could lose to someone so lowly, someone unable to use mana. Her anger rises as she wonders how she will explain this to his father when he returns for the bloodline continuation ritual. Cyan cries, begging for forgiveness. Anasilia shifts her focus to Hezar. She tells him that if he wasn't her husband's favored knight, she would kill him on the spot. She orders him to take Cyan and train him harder to avoid further embarrassment. Hezar takes Cyan and leaves. The boy continues to cry, his cheeks swelling from the slap. When Ciel and Anasilia are alone, she tells Ciel to stay close to Eugene. Ciel asks why, and Anasilia replies that Eugene is already strong enough to defeat her brother. Internally, Anasilia is boiling with rage. She wants nothing more than to kill Eugene, but knows it's impossible, as she would be the first suspect. The last thing she wants is to attract the attention of the family guardians. Ciel accepts her mother's order, adding that she wanted to learn more about Eugene and become his friend. In the afternoon, Eugene is running with sandbags on his arms and legs. Nina calls out to him, saying more young masters have arrived. She adds that the head of the family has also reached the mansion. Nina nervously asks Eugene to change his clothes to greet him. He replies that he will go as he is since he doesn't want to be late. Everyone gathers in front of the main entrance, waiting for the head of the family. Eugene focuses on recognizing the people around him. He spots the twins standing with Anasilia, the second wife of the main line. On the other side, he sees Theonis, the legal wife, and her son Iode Lionheart, the first in the line of succession. The sound of horses announces the arrival of Gilad Lionheart, the head of the family, accompanied by his younger brother Gion. Gilad greets his first son and asks if his abilities have grown with him. Iode lowers his gaze, nervously replying that he is doing his best to meet his father's expectations. Gilad's expression shows his displeasure, but shifts when he sees the twins. Ciel cheerfully greets him, saying she missed him. He finally looks at the children of the collateral line and invites them to have a meal together. It is the perfect moment to discuss the bloodline continuation ritual. At the dining table, the head of the family and the children are gathered. Two individuals catch Eugene's attention, a muscular boy named Gargis and a girl named Desira. Their presence intrigues him as their carriages arrived alongside the head of the family, suggesting their families hold significant standing with the main line. Eugene's gaze shifts to a blonde boy sitting at the table. Unlike the others, he seems unrelated to the family. Ciel notices him too and asks her father who he is. Gilad explains that he planned to introduce him later but agrees to do it now. The blonde boy stands, cheerfully introducing himself as Loberian from the Red Tower. The children are visibly surprised, including Eugene, who nearly spits out his tea. Eugene quickly deduces that Loberian must be the disciple of one of Sienna's disciples. 3 centuries ago, Sienna had become the youngest tower master of the Green Tower and revolutionized magical studies. Her influence extended to the Red Tower, where she trained other tower masters. Even today, she is revered as the grandmaster of both towers. Gilad turns to Eugene and asks if he's the child mentioned by his first wife. He comments on how Cyan insulted Eugene and his father, causing Cyan to tremble nervously. Eugene confirms but assures him he holds no grudges. Gilad remarks that Eugene likely feels this way because he won the duel. Eugene counters, saying that even if he had lost, his response would have been the same. He would have endured the shame of not defending his honor. Impressed, Gilad commends Eugene, calling him better than his son. Turning to Cyan, he says he's not ashamed of his defeat but disappointed in his reaction. Cyan started the duel with insults but hasn't apologized for his actions even after losing. Cyan stammers, trying to explain himself, but Gilad cuts him off. As a descendant of the Great Vermouth, Cyan must learn to honor not only himself but also his opponents. Reluctantly, Cyan faces Eugene and forces out an apology. Gilad shifts his attention back to Eugene, asking if his father trained him to fight. Eugene replies that while his father taught him the basics, the rest he learned on his own. Gargis and Desira, astonished, whisper to each other about how Eugene managed to defeat Cyan without formal training. Gilad, visibly pleased, smiles in anticipation of the upcoming ceremony. As the doors to the hall open, maids enter, carrying trays of food. Gilite invites everyone to enjoy the meal, officially starting the feast. After they've eaten, Gilite addresses the group, explaining why they've been gathered. He criticizes the traditional methods of the ceremony, calling them discriminatory. The main line enjoys a clear advantage, with access to mana training and real weapons, making it nearly impossible for collateral line children to excel. Gilite expresses his desire to test the potential of all the children equally. The ceremony should prove their lineage as Vermouth's descendants, not emphasize the division between main and collateral lines. Eugene listens, surprised by how kind this descendant of Vermouth seems compared to his ancient friend. Gilite announces he has enlisted Loberian's help for this new ceremony. At this, the blonde mage snaps his fingers, conjuring a holographic map over the table. Loberian explains the ceremony. The children will explore a magical maze he created. Their mission is to defeat the elite monster at its center, navigating various obstacles along the way. He assures them everything inside is an illusion, no matter how real it seems. He encourages them to treat it as an action-packed adventure. The ceremony will conclude when one of the 9 children defeats the boss, with performance points awarded based on their achievements. Eugene asks what the winner will receive. Gilite grins and reveals the prize, one of the treasures hidden in the family's treasure chamber. The mention of this draws a wide smile from Eugene. After the gathering, Eugene wanders through the mansion's dimly lit halls, already imagining the treasure he will claim. Confident of his victory, he contemplates his options. Suddenly, he notices Gargus and Desira waiting for him, their expressions serious. Gargus immediately asks Eugene if it is true that he won a duel against Tyan Lionheart. Eugene affirms but doesn't stop and walks past them, showing no interest in their lingering questions. Outside the house, Eugene is training with his sword. Once again, he notices the presence of Gargus and Desira, wondering why they refuse to leave. Gargus approaches him, standing directly in front of him. Without warning, he removes his shirt, revealing his muscular build, and offers Eugene the chance to touch them. Eugene declines without hesitation. Gargi mentions that his family produces a powerful medicine that enhances muscle growth, which sounds suspiciously like steroids. He asks Eugene if he's interested, but Eugene dismisses the suggestion, remarking that he didn't come all this way for something like that. Desira steps in, joking that the medicine makes you grow a beard regardless of whether you're a man or a woman. Shifting the topic, she asks why Eugene is training with a sword when he defeated Cyan using a spear. Eugene explains that he is skilled in both weapons. Without hesitation, Desira throws a spear toward him, challenging him to a duel since the spear is her specialty. Eugene finds her far easier to deal with than Gargus and agrees, seeing this as an opportunity to gauge the abilities of the top families from the collateral line. They prepare for the duel, taking their positions. Eugene continues to wonder why Gargus is still there. Gargus responds by declaring himself the judge, insisting on a fair duel while striking an odd pose. Eugene finds his behavior reminiscent of Moron and wonders if he's truly a descendant of Vermouth. Desira stands ready, her irritation evident. She is determined to show Eugene that spearmanship is not to be underestimated. Gargus signals the start of the duel, and Desira charges forward with impressive speed. Yet, she halts abruptly, startled by Eugene's stance. She cannot discern any flaws in his posture. Eugene, unfazed, urges her to continue. Annoyed, Desira rushes at him again, clashing her spear against his. She attacks repeatedly, but Eugene blocks every strike with ease. He acknowledges her talent, even without the use of mana, and recognizes her potential. However, at her current level, she poses no challenge to him. Mocking her, he questions why none of her attacks have landed, further fueling her frustration. Desira is unable to comprehend how Eugene can deflect all her strikes without moving from his position. Determined, she regains her composure and unleashes a flurry of rapid attacks, all of which Eugene effortlessly blocks. Suddenly, she executes a swift maneuver, positioning herself behind him and launching a decisive attack, convinced it is impossible for him to counter. Eugene swiftly leaps over the tip of her spear, driving it into the ground and immobilizing it. With his spear aimed directly at her face, Gargus concludes the duel, declaring Eugene Lionheart as the victor. In the middle of the night, Gargus wakes Eugene, insisting they need to combine their strengths. Irritated, Eugene asks if he was woken up just to hear that. He continues, explaining that they'll enter the labyrinth through different gates so they can't join forces. However, Gargus refutes, saying the destination is the same, the boss in the middle. He guesses the kids from the main line will try to work together too. Eugene asks if Gargus's plan is to use their combined abilities to defeat the boss, and Gargus confirms. But Eugene insists he's more than capable of defeating the boss on his own. Suddenly, Desira appears behind him and comments that Eugene is full of himself. She acknowledges his strength, and with his help, they can definitely defeat the boss. Eugene questions why she's so determined to beat the boss. Desira responds that the collateral line has never won a blood continuation ritual. But this time, with Eugene's victory over Cayenne, they have a chance. She asks Eugene, "Don't you want to beat the main line?" Meanwhile, inside the mansion, Anasilia is thinking about the master of the Red Tower and his potential choice to take Iode Lionheart as his apprentice. Iode has shown an early interest in magic and taught himself bits of it. If he does become the disciple of the Red Tower Master, she assumes he'll have to leave the house, effectively giving up his position in the succession and clearing the way for her children. However, there's still the issue of the bloodline continuation ritual. She's angry that her son lost to a child from the collateral line. But if Eugene beats the labyrinth, she knows the direct line will be humiliated, overshadowing Cyan's loss. 3 days later, the bloodline continuation ceremony finally begins. Lobarian summons blue flames in the hands of every child and tells them to use that flame to create their weapons. They need to mold the light using their imagination. Ciel is the first to succeed, creating a light sword. After testing it, she asks what they should do if the weapon breaks. Lobarian answers that the weapons and obstacles in the labyrinth are made of magic and will never break. Ciel then asks if they can create an animal instead of a weapon. But Lobarian clarifies that while they can create anything, living creatures are forbidden. Iode asks why that is. Lobarian explains that creating life is a power only living creatures possess, and attempting to replicate it is considered a taboo. The other children begin to create their weapons. Gargus forms a giant sword, Desira a spear, Cyan a sword, and Eugene a short sword with a shield. Suddenly, Ciel asks Eugene what he would do if they meet in the labyrinth and curiously wonders if he's going to fight her. Eugene turns to Gillate, asking if fighting is allowed. Gillate confirms that it is a competition, but cooperation and quick judgment are also important, as they are all part of the Lionheart family. Upon hearing the word family, Ciel blushes slightly and flashes Eugene a bright smile, making him feel uncomfortable. Once everyone has their weapons, Lobarian asks them to put on the necklaces he's creating with magic. He explains that these necklaces are connected to their consciousness. If they experience a great deal of stress, the necklace will react, and he'll be able to assess whether he should intervene. Finally, if they feel they can't continue, all they need to do is hold the necklace's gem and shout, "Help me." This will instantly transport them out of the labyrinth. Lobarian invites everyone to enter through the magic gate, assuring them they will appear in different parts of the labyrinth, even though they all use the same entrance. The children begin to move forward, and before entering, Ciel cheerfully wishes Eugene good luck, making him uncomfortable once again. Eugene steps into the labyrinth, the darkness reminding him of his old adventures with his party. He starts swinging his sword, careful not to hit the walls. This was his strategy all along. In confined spaces like these, a short sword and a shield are the best options. He recalls being in a labyrinth for children, so this challenge will be a piece of cake. Inside the labyrinth, a group of slimes charges at one of the 9 kids. The kid, clearly inexperienced in combat, immediately activates the magic stone in his necklace and calls for help. Lobarian materializes out of thin air and swiftly removes him from the area. An hour has passed, and 3 of the kids have already given up. Gillate looks at them with disappointment, telling them to rest. Ashamed, they follow his command. The ceremony continues, with Gillate and Lobarian now in a special tent filled with screens that display the kids' progress. They focus first on Gargus, who is currently fighting a goblin. When he swings his giant sword, it gets stuck. But with brutal force, Gargus breaks through the wall and decapitates the goblin. Next, they turn their attention to Desira. She encounters a group of slimes and swiftly pierces each one. However, she knows blades aren't effective against slimes, so she avoids further confrontation and presses on to advance deeper into the labyrinth. The focus then shifts to Cyan, who feels confident because his mother gave him and his sister a map of the labyrinth. He quickly spots a trap, activates it, and moves forward without issue. Now, they observe Ciel, who is fighting a goblin. The goblin attacks rapidly, but Ciel skillfully dodges every strike. With precision, she pierces the goblin's head with her sword. Afterward, she moves forward, only to find a dead end. Realizing her mistake, she decides to return to the last intersection. The screen now shows Iode, who is also engaged with a goblin. He appears stunned, unable to believe that magic can create such illusions. However, when the goblin attacks, he snaps back into focus. He manages to defend himself and then cuts the goblin's neck with a swift move. As the goblin dissolves into magic particles, Iode is amazed by the spectacle. This reaction piques Loberian's curiosity, and he wonders aloud if Iode is interested in magic. Gillite confirms that Iode has shown this fascination since he was a baby. They even hired a magic teacher, but Iode refused to continue his lessons. Loberian asks why, and Gillite explains that Iode believes he must become the next head of the family for his mother. Since magic is not highly valued within the family, Iode gave it up. Gillite then tells Loberian that if Iode still has an interest in magic, he wouldn't refuse the opportunity to become the disciple of the Red Tower Master. Loberian, however, doesn't make any promises. He will assess Iode's potential, but if he's not satisfied, he won't take him on as an apprentice. Gillite assures Loberian that he doesn't want to force anything. He just wants his son to follow his dreams. He mentions that instead of revering the family ancestor Vermouth, Iode idolizes the wise Sienna. Loberian agrees with this, recalling the old stories of Sienna's ability to create new spells when her party was in dire need. Gillite admits that he too has read those stories, but his favorite character was neither Vermouth nor Sienna. Before he can reveal who it was, he points to one of the screens, urging Loberian to look. The focus shifts to Eugene. He's standing in front of a massive troll, which begins launching powerful strikes at him. Eugene uses his shield to deflect the attacks and, in a surprising display of speed, slashes the troll with precision. Both Loberian and Gillite are astonished by the display. Gillite, watching the scene, can only mutter, "Amazing," as Eugene finishes the fight. The troll's massive corpse crashes to the floor, shaking the ground beneath him. Eugene moves forward as the body of the troll disintegrates into magic particles. Gillite watches in astonishment, marveling at the fact that a 13-year-old boy was able to defeat such a formidable foe. Loberian wonders how it happened. The troll might have been there as a trap, but Eugene defeated it so easily, especially considering it was larger than a typical troll. Gillite speculates that Eugene must have a natural-born talent. Meanwhile, Gargus is struggling against his own troll. One of the troll's attacks sends the muscle-bound fighter flying backward. However, Gargus quickly recovers, leaping back at the monster. Using all his strength, he manages to slice through the troll's leg, causing the creature to collapse. Without hesitation, Gargus jumps at the troll's head, delivering a powerful strike that pierces through its skull. To ensure the troll is fully defeated, Gargus slices at different parts of the monster's body. Finally, the troll lies motionless on the ground, and Gargus lets out a victorious roar. Despite his triumph, his injuries are severe, and his body gives out. He collapses unconscious on the ground as he attempts to move deeper into the labyrinth. In another part of the labyrinth, Cyan encounters a troll, but he quickly deduces that it's likely a trap rather than a real monster. He prepares a plan and throws a rock away from his position, causing the troll to turn and investigate the noise. Seizing the opportunity, Cyan moves forward, avoiding the confrontation altogether. Ahead, Cyan meets Seal, who is surprised to see her brother, especially since they had started in different sections. Confident in his memory of the labyrinth's map, Cyan tells Ciel to follow him so she doesn't get lost, and Ciel cheerfully agrees. Cyan sees this as a chance to redeem himself in his sister's eyes, especially after the humiliation he suffered earlier. Suddenly, Ciel asks if it's possible for any monsters to appear, since the labyrinth is supposed to be an illusion. Cyan responds, dismissing her question as obvious, but Ciel suggests that even a ghost could appear. Cyan freezes, visibly shaken by the idea of a ghost, though he tries to brush it off. Ciel notices his reaction and releases a soft laugh. Just then, a hand emerges from the darkness, followed by a bloody figure. Cyan yells in fear, but the figure screams in return, revealing that it's only Desira covered in wounds. Cyan demands an explanation, accusing her of trying to ambush him after scaring him with her appearance. Internally, Desira considers her first attempt to surprise them a failure, and she quickly moves on to her next plan. She starts running, leaving Cyan confused and surprised. However, Ciel reminds her brother that they shouldn't allow Desira to surpass them, and the two give chase. Desira realizes that she stands no chance in a 2-on-1 confrontation, and in frustration she wonders aloud where Gargus is. At that moment, she steps on a trap, causing the floor to collapse beneath her. Desira barely manages to jump across the hole and continues her dash toward the center of the labyrinth. Noticing the wide gap, Cyan decides to activate his mana, even though he had been saving this technique for the final boss. Running at full speed, he leaps over the hole and lands on the other side. He then calls to his sister, telling her to jump, assuring her that he'll catch her. However, Ciel, confident in her own abilities, effortlessly crosses the gap on her own. Cyan feels a sense of pride in his sister's skill, though it's tempered by a hint of surprise. The two continue chasing Desira, eventually reaching the labyrinth's central chamber, where they find a giant minotaur resting. The sight leaves them speechless, their faces displaying sheer amazement. Just then, a voice calls from behind, and they turn to see Eugene tired of waiting. Eugene casually asks why they all arrived at the same time. Cyan, surprised, asks what Eugene is doing there. Eugene replies that he's simply been waiting. He explains that he hasn't started the fight yet because he wanted to see who would arrive first. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.